Benny, good morning.
Good morning, Eleni.
Good.
How are you?
Good to hear. Yeah, great. What about you?
Yeah, we're fine. Thank
Good.
you.
Good to see you. Thank you for joining
Good to
us
see you too.
today.
Thanks
It's a
very much.
pleasure to
Yeah,
have you
can't
here.
wait for this. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Finally, I can join.
Okay, so we're just waiting some minutes just for Sarah to join us.
I'm here. I've been here for a while.
Sarah, wonderful. Good
Hi.
to see you too. Good morning from Brazil.
Good afternoon from the UK.
Wonderful. Okay, so I think we are ready to start. So, Ramiro.
Bom, eu só gostaria de agradecer. I can just few words in Portuguese and English a little bit, but eu só gostaria de agradecer novamente a presença de todos os participantes dessa nossa Escola Internacional de Pesquisa e Inovação Colaborativa, cujo tema são os Objetivos do Desenvolvimento Sustentável, e gostaria de agradecer especialmente aí no dia de hoje essa nossa parceria com o Reino Unido e com o Conselho Britânico. Eu agradeço muito a Vera, a participação dos professores Ben e Sara, que muito nos alegram aí de estarem junto conosco. Well, thank you so much for being with us. That's a great pleasure to have you here. My name is Ramiro Varhafti. I'm the president of the Araucaria Foundation. Araucaria Foundation is the institution that supports research and innovation, science research innovation in Paraná State. And thank you so much once more. I'm going to give the word to Eliane again.
Okay, thank you, Ramiro. So, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the second day of our International School for Collaborative Research and Innovation, Sustainable Development Goals. Yesterday, we had the pleasure to launch our online workshop with the Paraná State representatives and Stefano Marta, policy analyst of OECD. Today, in accordance with the strengthening of the strategic international partnerships of Araucaria Foundation, we are honored to welcome our UK partners who will address the international policies faced to the Sustainable Development Goals for joint collaboration. From now on, I would like to invite the Senior Manager in the British Council for the Newton Fund, Higher Education and Science in Brazil, Vera Oliveira. Vera coordinates international projects mainly in education and training, consumer goods, and creative industries in the public and private sector. In addition to the great experience in the development of government relations strategy through the engagement of the federal and state spheres. Also, Vera is a great partner of Araucaria Foundation. Thank you, Vera, for being with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Eliane. Thank you, Professor Ramiro. And good morning, everyone. Good afternoon to my colleagues in the UK. It's a great pleasure to be here. I'm very happy for the invitation, for the organization of this workshop. I think that discuss the Sustainable Development Goals, think about how research and collaborations in higher education can contribute to that agenda. It's extremely important in normal days, and I think that the days we are having are far from normal, and they put even more of an importance into these matters of why we should be working together internationally, why international networks matter. So as Eliane mentioned, I've been working with the British Council as Senior Manager for Higher Education Science and also coordinating Newton Fund projects. And for us at the British Council, we are deeply linked with the sustainable goals, sustainable development goals, in the sense of we exist to promote quality education. Gender equality is a big part of our agenda internationally. And the work that we do, it works towards promoting prosperity all over the world and to promote stronger links that will reduce inequalities. So with this in mind, we've been here in Brazil for 75 years this year. So this is our anniversary in Brazil. And during these times, we've been working as an international organization of the UK government to support cultural and educational opportunities. So to understand how we can partner with Brazil to take forward, strengthen the ties between both countries, and through that support this deeper engagement, especially in our case, specifically in education. So the work we've been developing, it looks at promoting high quality education, empowered people, and strong inclusive communities. That's how, if you were to ask anyone at the British Council what we do, that's what we want to do, ideally. And that's what we've been trying to do with our different projects. We've been working with Fundação Araucária and with the state of Paraná for a long time now. They've been big partners for us in our areas. And I can say a little bit about some of the projects that we've been doing where we see the support to this agenda of the SDG, especially in terms of the quality of education and how we can support to have a more equal country, equal world. So we work with arts, and in arts we have a whole work around capacity building, supporting independent artists, looking at how through the work with creative industries we can actually support women, vulnerable communities, so they can be empowered and be in charge and develop entrepreneurship and go ahead with creative industries, creative economy, and contribute to the local economies with that. We have a strong work also in society, working with civil society groups. Any education, which is my area, we work with different strands of education. For us, education, it is a continuum. We cannot have a high quality research, a high quality higher education without the input from the basic education, and how you can capacitate these young people so that they can understand they can have a trajectory and that they can be part of the whole innovation system. So we work with basic education, work is towards training teachers, supporting school leadership, which I think is essential. We also work with English because we consider English as a way to open doors for young people all over the world and support international connections. And we work with higher education science. I will focus a little bit more on that, and I'll speak very briefly because I'm aware of timing and I don't want to delay. We have two amazing speakers to hear from now. But in higher education, we've been stimulating partnerships between UK and Brazilian universities. We do that mainly through our internationalization program, University for the World. Paraná State has been a key partner for us in this. Right now, we have an amazing project with Paraná, where not only the state universities, but also the Federal University of Paraná came together with the UK university to take forward this agenda. And for us, it's really important to have this, to have different universities locally engaging and promoting one common agenda, because internationalization for us is about how you make this into a strategy, how you think long-term about what your university wants to be, and how together, and how to, through international collaborations, make sure that you're achieving your objectives, make sure that you understand the impact you can have in your local community and your research and the state development. We've been also collaborating, talking with Newton Fund. Newton Fund is a program by the UK government that's one of the implementers is the British Council. And here in Brazil, we've been working with different strands. And we have right now two amazing projects with Paraná Fund, co-funded by Newton Fund and Fundação Araucária. Both will look at sustainable development. They are about decarbonization, one of the projects, and the other project is about water sustainability. So how you can support the underground routes of water and make sure that this is sustainable. So it's really important for us in this context that these projects, that they are not only funded, but afterwards that we can tell their stories. And that's the second part we've been trying to work with Newton Fund, but also with our other agendas, how we can collect impact from what has been done in terms of research, how we can start telling these stories, not only inside the community through Fundação Araucária, but how we can start preparing this and sharing this with other decision makers and with the general public, how we can start showing the population the impact of science and how science contributes to everyone's well-being. So Newton Fund is a key part of this, and we've been conducting a parallel exercise of collecting these stories, and Eliane is one of the participants to that initiative. So it's always glad to have this participation by Paraná. but we're also talking about more broadly science communication. So we have FameLab going on this year, and FameLab is it's a competition, science communication competition, where 30 people will be talking about their projects, will be talking about science concepts in a way that can be fun, in a way that from your grandmother to your child, all they can understand and see why science is something that's actually quite engaging. And we are also talking about how we can stimulate more women to go into science. And more importantly, how once you are into the career of science, how women can actually go to the innovation route, how we can stimulate entrepreneurship and innovation to women who are working with STEM. So we've been working with this under the Women's Science Agenda. So those are different projects that we've been having where we look at how we can promote education, how we can promote gender equality, and how through this we can make institutions stronger and local economies stronger, because science in the end also contributes to that. And I'll be very brief now, but I think for us, if you think about future, and especially in the context of everything that's been happening right now, I see this agenda only becoming stronger for us with the British Council. I see the Paraná as one of our biggest partners in Brazil, who a collaborator who we want to work with all these agendas, because I think that the work that has been done with Fundação Araucária and the state of Paraná in general, in terms of trying to put together and create forums such as this, is really important, and it's one of the things that we are very proud of being part of. So I'd like once again to thank Professor Ramiro, Professor Eliane for the invitation, and also I'd like to extend my greetings to my colleagues here, Dr. Benny and Dr. Sarah. So thank you very much, and I hope that you have an amazing day. Thank you.
Thank you, Vera, for being with us and for being again one of the greatest collaborators and partners of Araucária Foundation. So now we would like to invite the Associate Director of International UK Natural Environment Research Council, Sarah Webb. Sarah is the Senior Manager within the Civil Service to move to programs where there are complex problems requiring resolution. Sarah has 16 years of experience in change management, program management, including Agile and Waterfall, manipulation of large data sets, and the development of IT solutions. Thank you very much, Sarah, for accepting our invitation and being with us today. I give you the floor.
Thank you very much. So I'm just going to share my screen with you because I've got a set of slides I'd like to talk through. So bear with me. Right, so hopefully everyone can see that. Thank you very much for the introduction. I'm Sarah Webb, and as stated, I'm the Associate Director in NERC, the Natural Environment Research Council for International. I've put together a very short agenda so you can see what I'm going to cover, and you can also think a little bit about, and if you've got questions and anything that we can maybe have as a bit more of a dialogue, because I'm aware that we haven't necessarily done a huge amount of work with Brazil. We've done some, but one of the reasons why I was so keen to come and talk with you today was to try and actually extend the level of collaborations that we're actually doing. I think there's an awful lot more opportunities that we can actually take forward. So just to sort of set the context as why I'm working on the international side. So I joined NERC at the end of last year, having come from central government. One of the roles that I had was actually doing large transformative projects, but equally I've been leading on various international collaborations, including Mission Innovation, which Brazil I think is part of, and working on clean energy innovation. So it's a natural step then for me to see how I can actually use some of those linkages and connections in that sphere to actually promote the work and collaborations within NERC. I have a science background with a DPhil in biology, and I also hold an MBA, so hopefully that means that I am well set for actually setting up collaborations and negotiating and seeing what we can take forward. So just in terms of the Sustainable Development Goals, every country is keen to actually see what we can do to take these forward, and actually how it helps our own countries. So in the UK, for example, I've just put this slide up to sort of say, you know, we have actually taken on the different government departments where they're actually looking at ways that they can actually implement the goals and actually benefit the UK. And specifically in terms of international collaborations, there's two departments on here, which, well, one you should be probably familiar with, which is DFID, soon to be merged with the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, and also the department that is our parent body, which is the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. And through these, we have got various programs that we want to take forward. So NERC is part of a larger organisation called UKRI, which is UK Research and Innovation, which is an internationally focused research organisation, as well as looking at some of research in the UK. And we report in through the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. So just to give you, and I don't know if the linkage is going to work particularly, let's see if it does. Yes. Right. That's going to play through. So basically, we currently invest over 7 billion a year in research and innovation, and we partner with academia and industry. And we're also actually looking at partnering with funders to actually add additional funding and abilities. Sorry, I'll go back through actual joint collaborations and actually shaping programs jointly. We are one of several research councils, which you will have seen in the slide flash up there, and they will come up in a little bit further through the talk. But I'm concentrating more on the natural environment because that's our area, and I can give you a few more examples specific to that. So, in case you're not familiar with NERC, I thought it was useful just to set the scene a little bit as to who NERC is. I won't concentrate on this too much, but it's just hopefully so that you can actually see, you know, what areas we covered and just think about the opportunities for collaboration. So NERC is the UK's largest funder for environmental science. And we want to make sure that environmental science is at the heart of everything we do. And this fits in quite well at the moment with UK being the host for the next COP26 on climate change. And we're working with the UK government quite closely on this to see what programs we can take forward, not only for addressing some of the challenges in the UK, but also more globally as well, because the environment is a global issue. The climate is a global issue that we all have to actually deal with. It doesn't recognise political barriers and boundaries. So we invest roughly about 330 million each year in cutting edge research and in postgraduate training and innovation, both in the UK universities and research centres, as well as internationally. We always want this as a solution-based approach, and where we will actually make a real difference. In the recent environment, we can't ignore COVID and what's happening with that. We're looking at what we can learn from COVID in the environment, what experimental test bed it's actually giving us in terms of reduced emissions or biodiversity to reduce spread or anything around those sorts of areas. So those are all areas that we're actively wanting to take forward. Just in terms of numbers of researchers we support 3,000 scientists and over 1,000 PhD students each year. And we have at any one time around about 1,000 research projects that are ongoing. And we have 60 UK or international programs as well. These can range from our core programs, which we fund directly with our budget, or some of the collaborative UKRI programs, which are actually we administer on behalf of the government. We have 55 universities and 20 individual research institutes, which are all NERC focused, that we sponsor as well. And also because of our role with some of our centres, such as the British Antarctic Survey, we have ships to help us get to Antarctica around an aircraft and polar stations. So it's a big organisation that we deal with. And as I said, one of the things we're wanting to do is see about future partnerships and opportunities. So the NERC remit, as I've alluded to, it's a holistic planet remit, that we're actually looking at terrestrial, marine, freshwater and earth science, as well as the polar sciences. We're tending to, which I'll come on to in the next slide, group these together under themes, because they're themes that the UK people and population can relate to, and it's the sort of buzzwords of the day that people actually really get behind, about resilience and productive and healthy environments. But we're looking basically at funding strategic research that actually will make a big difference, make societal difference as we go forward. So how does this actually all relate together? Well, UK Research and Innovation has its overarching delivery plan. We're currently just at the point of, if we hadn't have had the pandemic, we would have had a spending review. And the way that we tend to fund is we go in cycles, as I'm sure every government does. And we're just at the point now of actually waiting for that next cycle to know what sort of funding we're going to get coming through. So that's why everything's referring to 2019 rather than 2020. But coming from the main high-level delivery plan, then we have our own delivery plan. And then within that, the different areas that we're focusing on. As I said, for some of those, we're using the words that actually resonate in both government and also with our population. But underlying these, we still have the themes of terrestrial, marine, freshwater going all the way through. And if you want to have a look at the sort of areas that we actually deliver and what we're setting ourselves in terms of goals, I would actually suggest that you could have a look, and we'll share the slides after. You can actually have a look at some of the areas in the delivery plan, because it's covering all areas. Although you see here at the bottom, you've got something called global environment. It doesn't mean that we're just doing global collaborations in that particular part. We're doing collaborative workings across the whole of the NERC remit, and actually across the whole of the UKRI portfolio as well. So how are we actually then meeting some of the sustainable development goals, and how is UKRI actually shaping some of this? Well, we're all familiar with what the development goals are, and what we're doing is how we actually deliver this. We have a series of programs which have already been alluded to earlier, which, for example, Newton, but I'll give a flavour for some of these programs that we go through. And also, I've put in the slides as well, areas and questions for you as to where you think there could be opportunities for us to collaborate and take forward. Bearing in mind, although I'm concentrating more on the natural environment research areas, we also have engineering and physical sciences, social sciences, arts and humanities, medical research as well is very, very key. And we've got biological sciences and biotechnologies, and of course we've got a council that actually deals with looking at the closer to market for company type research as well. So just think about the wider context as well as we go through. So the Global Challenges Research Fund. This has actually been addressing some of the global challenges that we're all facing. And it's very much linked to the UK aid and how we actually meet the Sustainable Development Goals. It's tended to be challenge-led. So you look at a particular area that we need to actually do more research and more understanding of. And then that is actually shaping what the programs are going forward. So the ones that we've tended to be involved with in NERC have been around the resilient environment and anything that could encompass. So whether it's dealing with pollution or flooding, or volcanoes or soil erosion, or any of those sorts of areas, they can all be looked at. How do we make the environment more resilient? How do we tackle these changes? Equally, we've also just launching a new one, which we obviously can't formally do till we get a spending review or anything else around climate change. With the current pandemic, we've also actually used a real agile response to emergencies and opportunities, and we've used the last bit of money that we had to put out a call and say, are there areas that we could actually look at and utilise to actually see what difference across the world that this is making with COVID? So are there going to be nature-based solutions that could come out from this sort of research, or How are we looking at the changing patterns on land use or anything else? What about food sustainability and security? Those sorts of areas, getting people looking at it. We've also done a bit of research around looking at wastewater and then the loading of COVID in the wastewater, so that you can actually have a better idea of what the spread is across the population if you've not necessarily got the testing in place, that the UK has not been particularly great at doing, I have to say. Where the challenge areas and actually portfolios match, I've just done a very brief alignment with the Sustainable Development Goals. So you can actually see for the actual 6 portfolio areas that we've got, they align quite well. And we've done this on purpose so that we can actually see that we are contributing to actually addressing the goals. All the way through, as I said, with GCRF investment, it's following the same sort of rules as you would expect, that it's actually looking at the research itself, making a difference, and actually recording it and capturing what that actual impact is. So what's actually happening down on the ground for wherever the research is actually being done, and how do you actually translate from the research into policy. So policy is a really big driver that we certainly have in the UK, as to how is the research actually driving policy for how we change our farming mechanisms, how we actually do protect the environment, or how we change some of the energy productions that we're using. Should be going more towards hydrogen or whatever. But it's basically having a real impact on our side that we're seeing on the Sustainable Development Goals. This is just a case study that I thought would be nice, so that you can actually see a real example. What I'd like to sort of draw out from this is, you can see along the bottom, I've got 3 of the logos from UKRI, and this is because we're looking at the multidisciplinarity of research. So there's no point in just doing research and addressing some of the Sustainable Development Goals if you can't then take it to the next stage and actually really apply it, so it actually is making that difference. What we've found is that we can do the environmental research, and then we need input from the social sciences to how we translate that into a way that whichever our target audience actually understands and can use, be that government or actually the local population. And obviously on a country by country basis, we've all got slightly different policies. Our people understand things in slightly different ways. So it's not one size fits all. You can't say, all right, well, this is how we've implemented something in the UK, or this is how we've implemented something in Brazil. Well, you couldn't just swap it around. You have to adapt whatever it is. So that's why I think it's so important that we actually do bring in some of the extra research council resource and expertise. And you can see for this example that it's actually helping to reduce the hunger, and it's actually trying to be more responsive on the consumption and production in the environment, and actually all the partnerships for the goals. So those are the 3 parts that we're actually looking at. And although this wasn't actually done in Brazil, it's something that is equally applicable in Brazil, but we'd have to tweak and change the research for actually what we take forward. But you can see from the quote from Professor Will Blake that he's quite passionate about what he thinks about this, and by creating an evidence base around the environment, society, and cultural impacts of soil erosion, we can actually devise a pathway for positive change. And it's something we can apply across the world. So that's what GCRF is actually about. And I think that's quite a nice example. In terms of future GCRFs, and this is where I'm actually turning the tables back to you all and saying, actually, these are areas that we think, that we need to think about as to what the opportunities are. As I said before, we are waiting for a spending review, so we currently we can't commit to anything, but the intention is there that we could start to actually have exchanges and see if there are opportunities. But I just want to actually make sure that it's clear we can't do anything directly at the moment until we do get that spending review post-COVID. But we are wanting to see what we can do in terms of what we've already done in GCRF programs. As you see here, we've got 17 calls delivered over the past 2 years under the current portfolio. Climate change is actually being added to that portfolio going forward. But with the spending review, there's the potential to refresh and revise what's going on in the portfolios overall. So we've also got built environment coming in, and planetary health, and that the planetary health and climate change really do play to the COP26 ideas a little bit more. And then we've got the cross-cutting themes which are being proposed for the future initiatives. I'm not going to read them out because you can read them just as well as I can, but I just want you to think if there are opportunities, or you think, oh, you know, we would like to collaborate potentially with the UK in some of these areas, then you'll see from the slide when I did the presenter introduction, my email is on there. Please do get in touch. I'd like to see how we can develop some of these things going forward. This is actually quite a specific area that one of our researchers is interested to see if there's any appetite in Brazil to work with us on this. As you can see from the title, it's water security and sustainable development potential for the collaborations. And this is actually also, although it doesn't say it's on this would be something that would be also with ESRC, so bringing in the social sciences as well on our sides. But this is an idea that we were wondering if it could be an opportunity. I've put it here because we're going on to Newton in a bit, but I'd also like to say that although we've got the collaborative funds that come from UKRI centrally, NERC also has their own funds. So not necessarily, if something isn't necessarily suited to one of the government-run funds, we have a smaller pot that we actually also do our own supported research. But please do let me know if there is appetite to look at the demands on water resources and how these interactions and dependencies work, what long-term trends and what sort of changes that's actually going to have on it, and the societal developments, mitigations around water risks and security. And then also obviously because of competing pressures such as food and actually making that stable, what do we need to do? How could we potentially work together? And then, as I said before, a lot of this is also about policy and translation into the futures. So are there the nature-based solutions that we could think about? Integrated catchment management, what could actually help support greater water security? Because this is going to be a global issue that every country, I think, on the planet will be facing at some point, some sooner than others. And actually also, what are the barriers? And that the barrier part is probably more where some of UKRI's other council areas can come in. So the Newton Fund as a whole, and this is just a snapshot from the scheme's website, is just to say, one of the key parts that we are looking at with Newton is actually partnering. We partner in 87 countries, and to date, it's been a 735 million investment. There are 17 countries that are actively taking part, and there are 7 UK delivery partners. We are keen to see if through Newton, if there's another round of Newton, that UKRI can actually also partner more in this, as well as just the British Council. So in terms of objectives, I'm sure you're very familiar with this, but I've just put it up just to remind everyone about promoting the economic development and the social welfare of partner countries, and actually having the strong, sustainable relationships. And all this is actually then about demonstrating the impact and measuring the impact and seeing how this is actually helping people and the translation into new innovation systems. This just gives an overview of the collaborations in Brazil from a UKRI perspective. So I stress the UKRI perspective. And you can see that we at the moment, we've been limited in working and engaging with Pesquisa, and we'd be keen to see and develop new extra linkages, extra collaborations going forward. We've been very pleased with and excited about the programs that we have been doing, and we want to actually extend that network out a lot more. Currently, you'll see from the timescales that it's just the Latin American Biodiversity Programme that's still running. The others have actually finished. And this is one actually of the problems with Newton. It tends to, the way it was set up, we have a little bit of a cliff edge in terms of continuity of funding and relationships, unlike GCRF, which actually has a lot more of a gradual systematic sort of turnover of programs so that it's a little bit more easy to actually continue with funding. One of the things with NERC direct funding, which, you know, on collaborations and that, is it can actually be staggered as well so that you don't necessarily get those cliff edges in funding going forward. And that's one thing that we are actually, as a council, working with UKRI and BEIS, trying to say that you need to make sure you've got that continuity so that you can maintain and build on existing relationships. And you'll see, you know, there's quite a few other UKRI programs as well that we have been doing, but as I said, we are keen to do more. This is just a case study, which actually isn't a NERC case study, but it's quite a nice one because although it's not a NERC case study, it's an engineering and physical sciences one. It's actually looking at, you know, the citrus waste and some of the areas that, you know, what can you do to actually reduce this? And I think reducing waste and recycling and reusing is going to be a key theme coming out, probably from our government's next spending review as to what they want to do and how they want to tackle some of these things, so that we don't have, certainly in the UK, and I don't know how Brazil actually does with this, but we tend to have a lot of a throwaway society. So we're trying to reduce the use of plastics a lot. We're trying to actually reduce the fashion industry that we have that tends to have a lot more of, you know, wear once or twice and throw away because it's so cheap to buy clothing relatively. And yeah, that is such a waste. We shouldn't be doing that. We should be using and recycling. So the more we can do that, the better it's going to be for the planet, and the less other products we're going to use. We're not going to have the water use or anything else going through these. So it has a lot of knock-on effects in actually bringing these projects together. So I just wanted to share that as an example with you. So we've had a couple of examples of things we've done in the past, and now we need to look to the future as to what can we do in the future. So opportunities for future partnership, and this is just the ones that we've identified so far for UKRI partners. We would be keen to see if there are actually others as well, but this is just sort of the UK side. I'm not going to go through all this. It'll take far too long to actually talk through, but yeah, as I said, areas that you can identify with, fantastic. Do get in contact. We can actually explore a little bit further as to what those opportunities are. The ones that we are very keen in the shorter term for taking forward are things probably around biodiversity and reforestation and those sorts of areas, because that's also quite big on the UK research areas as well. So it sort of just expands that sort of remit. But you'll have a copy of this so you can actually look at it in a little bit more leisurely time than the flashing up on the slides here. So this is actually just to end with, we're sort of drawing to the end. Don't know what's happened to the top of the screen. I think it's disappeared. It was on there. This is talking about TASE, Towards a Sustainable Earth, which is a program which is specifically designed to actually achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goals that we've launched. And we've only had one round because it's very similar to what they do on the Belmont Forum. And I believe Brazil is engaged with that as well. But one of the things with the spending review coming up, as this falls within my team's remit, we're looking at whether or not there is appetite to do another round of TASE, Towards a Sustainable Earth, and what sort of areas we could explore on that. So we've got 2 projects funded with TASE. Brazilian funders weren't involved with that, but which actually demonstrates it doesn't need to necessarily have that match funding or anything else with it. The opportunities are there, but you know, it's not a deal breaker. So that's another program as well that I'd urge you to just have a little look at and see if there are opportunities. Questions? That brings me to the end of the areas I wanted to cover, and actually give you an opportunity to ask me anything you'd like to know. Thank you.
Yeah. Wonderful. Sarah, thank you so much. We'll keep the questions for the end of the session, right?
Okay.
If you don't mind, of course.
Whatever actually fits. I didn't know quite exactly what you wanted to do on the session,
Okay,
so
wonderful.
I'm flexible.
Okay, thank you so much. So questions will be at the end, right? So I'd like just to register that we have the Adam Patterson with us. He is the British Council of UK in the state of Paraná. So Adam, be very welcome to our workshop and thank you for your support. So Sarah, we all have the same concern of overcoming global issues with partner countries. So I'm sure that this is especially the case of UK and Paraná specifically. So I'm very happy to have you here and think about opportunities for future collaboration. I'm very optimistic that we can work together in joint collaboration together with the British Council, NERC, and the Al-Qaeda Foundation. So we have lots to work ahead. Thank you so much. So as I mentioned previously, we'll keep the questions for the question and answer session, right? So from now on, I'd like to invite Professor Benny from Coventry University. Professor Benny is the Professor of Sustainability and Supply Chain Management and the co-leader of the Sustainable Production and Consumption Cluster at the Center for Business and Society. Professor Benny has a great interest in sustainability and environment conservation. Over the last 5 years, he has focused his overarching research area on sustainable operations and supply chain management, in particular, the exploration of circular economy principles in manufacturing processes. He was one of the main investigators and a member of a consortium of 7 universities in Europe recently, being awarded by the Horizon 2020 MSCA Innovative Training Network. Thank you, Professor Benny, for being with us and for sharing your expertise. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Eliane. So with your permission, I'd like to share my screen now.
Sure.
Thank you. Oops. Okay, good afternoon, UK time, and good morning, everyone in Brazil. I'm very, very pleased to be here, to be invited by the Oracoria Foundation and particularly Professor Eliane to join this very interesting workshop. I understand that workshop already started from yesterday, and once again, it's my pleasure to join this community. So in the next 45 minutes or so, I'd like to present some of my research related to circular economy. And like Eliane mentioned before, I'm from Coventry University. My area is sustainability and supply chain management. So Eliane has asked me to share some of these projects. So I'm very pleased to have listened to Sarah early on about the portfolio of research in the UK, UKRI, in which some of my work actually is funded by UKRI through various routes from the QR Fund, SPF, as well as the GCRF. So what I'm going to do now is to put this projects towards the end of my presentations, and I'm trying to build a context of circular economy that will then lead us to these projects. Right. We look at these slides. I think it's pretty. There are two things here. One is the so-called optimistic view and the pessimistic view. So let's take a look at the worst case scenario here, whereby in 2050 we reach just below 10 billion populations. And the worst case scenario would be with the current lifestyle, consumption lifestyle, then it will probably need 3 planets to take care of our belongings. So that's, for me, is the worst case scenario. If you look at simply the usage of aluminium, for example, it's clear that over time, aluminum metals has been used by industry, particularly the biggest users are these of this aluminum would be the transport industry and also the construction industry. Now, if we look at the building or construction industry, take a look at, for example, a facade. Facade has been used by large buildings, commercial buildings, because they're strong, they are durable, and because they last very long, the stock or the availability is very high. So we tend to use aluminium for such a long time. And on the other hand, the aluminium is also low in flow because we keep using it, but there is nothing afterwards. So maybe until 20 to 25 years, we will probably not change our windows, let's say, because of the durability of aluminium. And at the moment, there seems to be no plan for recovery of aluminium, except, of course, recycling. Now, as we know that the modern facades contains or consist of many electricals, electronics, they're very, very sophisticated these days. And therefore, there are a lot more complexity in terms of recovery of these components, or metal components. And therefore, there's ever-increasing need for us to be able to recover these components, such as aluminium, steel, or copper. And of course, the other bigger users that I mentioned before is car industry, although the flow of the recycling or the next use of body aluminium is a lot faster. It's a lot higher than in building. At the Center for Business and Society where I'm working, there's a cluster called Sustainable Production and Consumption. And as you imagine, our cluster is inspired by SDG number 12, where we would like to think about on how we consume our resources. And when we produce our goods, that this will meet the need of current generation without actually compromising the ability of the future generation to meet their own needs. So this is my cluster. And the kind of work that we do in this cluster ranges from waste reduction or energy reduction, and then into the community. So what we do needs to be useful for the community, for the corporate, for the businesses, and also for the consumers. And when we're delivering our works, we also look at the two technologies, particularly digital supply chain technologies and also the Industry 4 technologies, when we, everybody now is in the world trying to learn about this technology. Back to the aluminium, and if you look at the environmental impacts of aluminium, someone would say that, hang on a minute, resources of aluminium bauxite is actually a lot. Yeah. So we haven't really, there's no concern about it. However, although the reserve of bauxite is quite a lot, the process of making, or the process of producing aluminium is actually very energy intensive. So the energy consumption for refining the bauxite, the smelting process from alumina to aluminium is actually quite significant. And therefore, although the raw material isn't an issue, the energy required to make a product, that could be an issue. Well, someone would say that, yes, we could use renewable energy, for example, from hydro and from solar. But still, in terms of primary production, like I said before, more and more aluminium is actually used to replace plastics because they have lower cost due to the long lifespan. And the problem now is that the secondary production, which is quite low at the moment, so we need to increase the secondary production, because we know if we do secondary production, then energy usage will be a lot lower. Now, this is the starting point of the so-called circular economy, where we want to we want to encourage the secondary use of our materials. You probably heard about circular economy, but for those who haven't heard circular economy, let's take a look at the opposite end of the circular economy, which is the linear economy. As I mentioned before, from bauxite, we we purify it into alumina, and then we do the smelting process to get the aluminum ingot. And then from the aluminum, we can produce the cans of a drink. And then when we finish using it, we usually dispose it. And this is what we meant by linear economy. Obviously, that the reason why we have this, because usually the product life is quite short and the raw material is quite cheap, and therefore it encourages the customers to buy more, which is obviously not sustainable. So what do we need to do? We should collect it, yeah, and then we probably recycle it back to the aluminum ingot, and then we can make, or we can produce bottles of cans of Coke. Now, for some people, they consider this as a circular economy because it's clearly circling from the end of use to the beginning of production. But for me, this is not necessarily circular economy. To me, this is a recycling economy. And the main reason for this is that a circular economy means that we improve the reusability of the components, repairability of the product, and perhaps remanufacturability of systems. So if we have a product and the product reaches the end of life, perhaps what we should do, we should not immediately recycle it if we can reuse it. And perhaps we don't necessarily remake if we can repair it first. So anything that we can use the product which will have the lowest energy or effort, that would be preferable in terms of circular economy. And if we cannot reuse, repair, or remake, then the last resort, probably recycling it. And this is what I meant by the circular economy. So if you look at the circular economy, it means an industrial economy that is restorative and regenerative. And there are three things that, to me, what circular economy is about. The first one is the minimization of consumption. So if we don't need to make something, if we don't need to have something, don't make it. So because then we want to minimize the consumption of raw materials. But if we have to make something, then if it's possible, use it, utilize it as long as possible, or maximizing the circulation. And then if it reaches the end of life, then we would need to minimize the amount that ends up in the incineration or landfill. So these three principles, if you like, of circular economy are really important. Talk about the decision as to whether we recycle, reuse, refurbish, or remanufacture. It all depends, isn't it? It all depends on the type of products. When I say it's better to reuse than recycle, well, it depends. If the product is already the product is a can of Coke, then obviously the most feasible next recovery would be recycle. But if we look at another product, bicycles, probably the easiest for them is to reuse it. And if we talk about aircraft engines or car engine, it's probably refurbishing it or remanufacturing it. So the choices, although I said early on that, yes, it's great to have a reuse, repair, remanufacture, and these are all better than recycling. I think it all depends on the product that we talk about. Talking about circular economy, then I have to make credits to the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. And in these diagram of, well, I call them butterfly diagrams, it's clear that there are two focuses of a circular economy. So on the right-hand side, which is called technical nutrients circle, obviously the focus is going to be the cascading use the recirculation, extending life of products, maintenance, reusability, and so on. But if you look at the left-hand side of this diagram, then you probably think of something different. So, for example, you look at waste prevention or pollution prevention and ecological restoration. So, although both of them ends up with a better sustainability performance, and perhaps in terms of operationalizing it, there's a slight difference of focus between the right-hand side and the left-hand side of this diagram. In about 2016, we do some work to redefine the circular economy principles, and the output or the outcomes of this work gives us the three values or three groups of circular economy values. So the first one, we term them as principles. And the principles means that anything that we can actively do to encourage or to promote circular economy. So an examples would be how to use or how to cascade the products. And also we try to minimize the waste, how to optimize the economic value of product, as well as the physical value of that product after end of life, which then we need to look into or look at the environmental consciousness while minimizing the leakage. So these sets of principles, like I said to you before, are anything that we can actively do to promote circular economy. However, in addition to these active sort of principles, we need to bear in mind that it all depends on the product, because the way the product is developed, the way the product is manufactured, that will lend itself into how easy or how feasible it is to apply circular economy, how easy or how feasible it is to apply remanufacturing, for example. So if I then take a look at an attribute, circularity, it means that the way the product is designed supports circularity. If we look at attribute of systems thinking, then we say, okay, in order for us to apply circular economy principles, then we need to look at everything in systems. Yeah. So that's the attribute. And then we need some enablers for us to be able to apply both the principles and the attributes. So for example, if we look at technology, so we need enabling technology in the high value products such as printers or tractors or whatever it is, that then from this, by using the technology, we will be able to monitor the health, the conditions of this asset, the printers or the tractors, so that then we can apply appropriate maintenance regime that then extend the life of that product. Now, extending the life of that product is certainly promoting the principles of circular economy. And similarly, we need to have a market. We need to ensure that our the output or the outcome of the remanufacturing products or refurbished product can actually be sold in the market. And we need to make sure that there is market, there are customers who will or can buy our products. And similarly with the innovation. So take a look at a first example of cascading orientation. Now, this principle aims to keep the materials, maybe the products, maybe the components, or biological nutrients, longer in circulation. So, like I said to you before, we need to extend the life of that. And before reaching the end of life, we need to be able to transform it into perhaps different types of products or different materials. So this is the first principles. Next principles, for example, leakage minimization. The term leakage, you immediately associate it with something liquid, something gas. that can come out of the product or from the factories and then polluting the environment. Of course, that's the case. But also, the term leakage, I'd like to use it to explain how bad or how poor it is when we're trying to reuse, or we're trying to recycle, or we're trying to remanufacture. So let me give you an example. A couple of years ago, we had a supplier of printers at our university. And at the end of the contract, a third-party logistics provider actually take the printer from our offices and then simply throw it in the back of the lorry. So for me, that is a leakage. And the reason why I said leakage, because by throwing it, by not maintaining it, by doing careless things, there are components that can be used, that actually can be used for the next product, cannot actually be used because they're broken into pieces now. So that's anything that reduces the chance for that product for being reused, that I consider as leakage. Take a look at the attributes. So I mentioned to you before, attribute of circularity. It means that these are the characteristics. This is the way a product is being designed or being developed to promote circular economy. So if we design a product that can be easily disassembled, if we can design the product whereby the materials that we use for that product can actually easily be recycled, then it certainly helps us in terms of improving the circular economy or circularity. And in terms of enablers, here you go, I mentioned before, smart printers, and often we say the printers probably only last, particularly the inkjet printer, probably lasts about 2 or 3 years, because that's the reason why. The reason is that the company wants the customers to buy more, and they deliberately design new products so that the older products can be expired or obsolete pretty soon, so that then we keep buying new products. But probably there is a change now towards the development of a newer types of printers, whereby they have the condition monitoring enabled, technology enabled in that printer, so that then printer can be monitored by the producers. Markets, as I mentioned before, I take an example of tires and rubbers. So if you have a car and you have tires and rubbers that will eventually reaching end of life, and you usually recycle it. And the problem is that if you do not have the route for recycling it, then you're in trouble. So let's take a look at some of the routes whereby our tires can be used. For example, in energy industry, cement industry, and of course, or perhaps for secondary raw materials that they use for making roads or what's the word for this? In the playground, there's usually area whereby the floor of that playground is rubbery, and that can come from the secondhand tires and rubbers. So in the cement industry, for example, they use tires and rubbers to as a fuel for the kiln process, because it's very energy intensive in that industry. So if we look at circular economy, then we might be thinking, what is the business side of this? Is it all about sustainability? Is it all about environment? Well, it would be nice if we could do both at the same time. And it's very often that we do business, but then at the same time, we also promote the circular economy. And here are some of the business models whereby we can do business, we can get the economic benefits, and at the same time, we get the sustainability benefits. So the first example of this is dematerialization. I'm sure you are very aware these days. Everybody's now reading newspapers from the iPad, from computers or electronically. And also we stopped buying DVDs or Blu-rays, but instead we pay for Netflix services or cinema services on the internet. And that way, we certainly reduce the consumption of the raw materials for making the DVDs. Secondly, I said very early on that if you do not, or you could delay making things, don't make it. And there is a technology for that. 3D printing, for example, is clearly a supporter of circular economy because 3D, by using 3D printing, you can actually print or you can produce your product there and then, so you don't have to make it for stock. Such components can be made by 3D printing, and the technology, the 3D printing technology is developing so quickly these days. Well, of course, these are all to do with the technological breakthrough. Like I mentioned before, we need the IoTs, for example, to monitor the condition of our assets on the field. Perhaps we have material recovery technology so that then we can collect or we can recover materials more easily and more cheaply. We may be able to use robotics for disassembling the components of products, 3D printing, and so on. And with these technologies, obviously, we can then develop technology or develop products that last pretty long. Now, this is very interesting because you may say, well, especially in the UK, because the price of service or the price of repairing these appliances tend to be expensive, and people tend to buy and then throw away the equipment or the appliances at the end of life. But there is also a trend in the product development of this equipment whereby products are being made modular, so that it's easy for the end users to replace or to repair it when it's broken. Repair, refurbish, remanufacture. This is quite interesting in terms of business because I was working with a company called Komatsu in Indonesia, and they clearly have the two business units. The first one is selling a brand new excavator, and the other business unit is doing the remanufacturing. Now, if you think about this, it's quite interesting because the raw materials or the incoming material for the remanufacturing plant has to come from the Komatsu tractors that's already on the field. But on the other hand, we would say we would be thinking like, how can the brand new Komatsu product be in competition with the second-hand product? So that, to me, is very interesting phenomenon to be researched. Talking about the excavation capabilities, in the past we buy this excavator and we use it, we get something out of it because the tractor is our own tractor. But nowadays we don't have to own the tractor; we can buy this so-called excavation capability. We buy it based on the function. We buy it based on the usage of that. We're buying based on the time that we're using this asset. So consider that we're buying this asset from a company called Caterpillar, let's say, or Komatsu, and we obviously pay cash. Yeah? And then we get the equipment to use to dig the hole. But then the tractor is actually owned by the manufacturer, and therefore the manufacturers are responsible to do the maintenance, to monitor it, to provide spares and the technology so that this tractor can work, can function, at high utility. Whereas the consumer only pay based on the use, based on how many holes being dug, and so on. Now, this business model is also part of the circular economy, which is called the product service systems. So Rolls-Royce Power by the Hour is one of the most frequently sort of cited cases of product service systems, whereby airlines paying Rolls-Royce on the basis of how long the engine is used in the aircraft. And there are many other examples, for example, the Xerox photocopy machines, and also the manned truck. So what I'm going to stop here for the moment and take a look at perhaps some of the things that we could do during and post-pandemic with regard to circular economy. And we know that during the pandemic, our movement are restricted and so on. And clearly, it's challenging in terms of sustainability. We also heard that the usage of plastics, for example, is increasing a lot during this time. But on the other hand, there are other things, there are business models, and there are businesses that benefit from this. So if you think about product design, in the future, perhaps in addition to making the product longer in circulation, perhaps we could also say that the reason why we want to make the product modular, because we want to limit the contact between the engineers and the users. So the more the users can do themselves, the better. So that aspect of movement restrictions or distancing actually help the development or the design of circularity. Talk about circular economy, then we need to think about supply chain. Now, in a simple term, we look at the supply chain as a chain of suppliers and customers. So we have customers supplied by the retailer is supplied by the distributor is supplied by manufacturer, and the manufacturer is supplied by suppliers of the raw materials. Now, design of supply chain and logistics has been a classic issue because we want to get the optimization in terms of cost reduction. So we know that when we're delivering a brand new product, we still think about how to reduce costs from our supply chain. Then when we look at circular economy, whereby at some point we need to take our photocopy machines to be repaired and then refurbished if there are more components to be replaced, and perhaps at some point needs to be recycled and remanufactured. So that means we are faced with the so-called reverse logistics issue. Now, the reason why reverse logistics is important because reverse logistics is costly, not only from the point of view of transportation, but also the product that we bring back to the point of use is not brand new product. So inherently low value, inherently low profit. And therefore, when we think about circular economy in the business point of view, we need to look at not only from the design point of view of the product, but also the supply chain issues of that. So in summary, when we talk about circular economy, it's often we are thinking about, oh, it's all about recycling. As long as we do recycling, it doesn't matter. We use more and more, that's fine as long as we can recycle it. I don't think that's what circular economy is about. And also, we can produce waste a lot, yeah, because we have such a good waste processing facilities. I don't think that's also circular economy. Circular economy is actually about prevention, preventing waste from occurring at the first place. Resource efficiencies. So we do not need to produce a product. We delay it. We don't have to do it. We don't have to take our resources. And also, it's about circular process of use and reuse. And therefore, we need to map the material streams and all the processes that will support it. So this means in circular economy, we're not just talking about the product, but also we need to think about the business model that can generate revenue for companies, and at the same time, good for the environment, good for the sustainability. And for that, we need to design our product well. We need to think about the selections of raw materials, the processes, the technologies that can support circular economy. We'll talk about the attributes of the products that we make. We also need to think about the supply chain, the bigger issue of how we're going to deliver this product from the manufacturing to the users, and at the same time, not the same time, but later on, to take back the end-of-life products from the users to the point of production. We need also to think about the customer image, like I said before. If we are selling second-hand products, remanufactured products tend to give exactly the same warranty, but not many customers believe or have faith in that. So perception, trust, and attachment to the customers. And for these, everyone needs to think in systems. We need to think about the tools and methods to help industry to become more circular. So that's the first part of my talk about circular economy. So I'd like now to continue to the second part, which is not that long. So I'm going to have 4 projects to share with you. And it is not my intention to talk about this project in great detail, but I wanted to share with you this is what I'm doing. And if you have questions or if you're interested in some of the projects, then I'd be more than happy to talk to you later on. So this first project is the project funded by the EIT Raw Materials. EIT is one of the arms of the Horizon 2020, and he's be working with partners in the Netherlands, TU Delft, Leiden, Leuven in Belgium, Aachen in Germany, Italia in Spain, and also Coventry University, obviously. So we are looking at the next generation of facades, as I mentioned before, how to move from selling facade to selling the function of the facade, which means that this is one of the efforts or one of the ways to promote circular economy. The problem is, however, we haven't got the business model for this. How are we going to take back windows of facade from the buildings? Because, like I said to you before, the cost for dismantling it is also high. So in this project, we're working together as a multidisciplinary team. There are architects, civil engineers, environmental, supply chain. So in this case, Coventry is in charge to build or to develop a business model that can support the reverse logistics of this facade. Second project, like I said, like I mentioned before, it's supported by UKRI. In this case, it's the ESRC. I'm glad that Sarah mentioned early on that we work together with ESRC. And actually, from this project, I was invited by NERC to be one of the reviewers of the plastic program at NERC. In this project, as a social scientist, a group of social scientists, I would say, we are looking at social innovation methods on how to address the problems of bioplastics. So we're interested in looking at the impact of bioplastic packaging to the environment and society by using the so-called social innovation technology. And there are 4 partners in this project: UK, Canada, Brazil, and also Poland. So Canada is represented by Simon Fraser University. The Brazilian university is the University of San Carlos, and 2 Polish universities based in Warsaw and Lodz. The third project is also supported by UKRI from the QRSPF scheme. And in this project, we are working with the Indonesian partners. We're looking at how we're looking at sustainability in the UK-Indonesia coffee supply chain. So, as you know, the global coffee industry faces a number of sustainability risks. And in this project, we would like to see risks, for example, price volatility, labor supply, climate change, and also pest and disease, and any other risk that will that may affect the sustainability of the supply chain between the UK and Indonesia. So we are interested in how this risks affect each other, and obviously how this will affect the export and import of coffee between UK and Indonesia. Three stages in the research. First of all, we do a survey of the UK coffee stakeholders, and then we take this output of the survey to the Indonesian counterparts through interviews. And then the third one, we are building a computer-based model using system dynamics so that we can simulate, we can do the what-if scenarios. If we change this risk, if we increase the risk, what happens? If we reduce the risk, what happens? So that's this project. Other projects, we're looking at making agri-food supply chain more circular. And again, we are working with the Indonesian partners, University of Indonesia. The funding from this comes from the GCRF scheme that is managed by the Academy of Medical Sciences. In I think the area is food security. So in this project, we're trying to map the agricultural products from farm to the market, and we're trying to identify where the points where the waste and losses of these agricultural products usually occur. And then when we know where they are, we're trying to implement the circular principles, trying to prevent that waste from occurring in the first place. If the waste already occurs, already happening, then we're trying to bring that back to the circulation. We bring or process that waste into something that is more useful. Our partners in Indonesia is in the environmental engineering area. So with that, I think I end my presentations. Like I said to you before, if you have more questions about my projects, feel free, and then we can have a discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Benny, for the insightful presentation and for sharing your very successful projects. I'm sure that those case studies highlights the opportunities for collaboration together with us, together with the Paraná State and at Al-Qaeda Foundation, considering the university, the industry, and the society for the social and economical development. So thank you for sharing that with us. I would like also to mention and highlight to Sarah and Vera that we are very interested in strengthening Paraná partnership with NERIC and of course the British Council, and possibly for our new arrangement for research and innovation in water. I think this could be a good start. So now we open for questions, but even before that, I'd like to thank also Erika Azevedo. Erika Azevedo is the business development consultant for Latin America and for Coventry University. So thank you, Erika, for all your support and network connecting us together with Benny and Sarah.
Thank you very much, Eliane. I'm very happy with this event today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so now we open for questions and answers. So of course we'll have questions for both of you, Sarah and Benny, and of course if you want to ask questions for Vera as well. Yes, Vera, I think we're open to participate in this network. So I have lots of questions here, so let's start some ones to Sarah. So Sarah, I have a question here from Genilson Geraldo. He's from UFSC, right? So it's from Santa Catarina. In 2019, the Sustainable Development Goals were removed from Brazil's economic plan. This morning, the new plan is being voted on again without the inclusion of the Sustainable Development Goals. So what is your opinion about this situation in Brazil?
Well, I mean, with all those situations, I think it's down to individual countries that need to think about what they want to do. And while I think, sustaining the world and the population as a whole is a good concept, and I'm sure that is something that Brazil wants to do, it's not something that NERC as public sector research establishment in the UK can really comment on. I understand it's very difficult, but I still think, there are opportunities for research and collaboration in this area.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Sarah. Maybe I think I'll keep the questions to Sarah first, and then we can change to Benny, right? Sarah, there's another one here. They're wondering to say the following. It's from Mauricio Zedzik, sorry if I mispronounced your last name, from Universidade Positivo. He's the chair for a graduate program in environmental management since 2005. So he says, I did not see any circular economy topics in the lists you presented, Sarah. So are there funding opportunities for collaboration in this area?
Absolutely. So it's not something that would, circular economy is something that actually goes underlying the resilience themes that we actually look at. So we already are doing research and funding research in this area, and we're collaborating with some of the other countries as well around the world in this area. So while it wasn't explicitly mentioned, it's certainly an area that we are very keen to explore in productive environment and resilient environment. It comes under those very nicely.
Yeah.
So we're very keen to pick up with you separately and have a conversation around that.
Yeah, sure. Well, definitely we'll do that. So the other one, both of you can comment on that. It's from Sandra Schiavi. She's the head of the International Office at the State University in Maringá, one of our 7 state universities, and a researcher on small farmers and global agri-food supply chains. So the question is, Brazil has an important role in world's agribusiness, and Paraná is a key state for sustainable development in this field, economic, environment, and social issues. So how have agriculture, agribusiness, and related themes, for example, food systems, been researched from your side? And how do you see the possibilities of partnerships in this area? So I think both of you can comment. If Sarah wants to start.
So if I start, and then we can do a bit of a tag team on this.
Yeah.
So one of the research councils is biology and biotech, essentially, and they concentrate on agriculture and food systems, and we complement each other with the natural environment and then the agriculture and food systems with the BBSRC side. So it's a very key theme that we actually look at. We tend to, if we do a multidisciplinary approach, then on agriculture and agribusiness, we tend to have BBSRC lead and NERC sort of are supporting on that rather than as directly lead. So there are quite a lot of, I'm sure, possibilities that BBSRC would be very keen to discuss with you, and there could actually also be, depending on just what aspects of agriculture it is, what parts of food systems, because very close, obviously, the natural environment and food, sustainable agricultural, that it overlaps quite a lot. It could be an area that might be NERC, but it's more likely to be BBSRC. But that's certainly part of a very, very key theme. And we have food systems as, I think, one of the big areas in GCRF as well. So, let's take that off, and I can put you in touch with either colleagues in NERC, that depending on what the exact part is, or in BBSRC.
Kenny, would you like to comment?
Yes, of course. Thank you. Thanks, Sarah, for that introduction there. I just wanted to share my project with Indonesia, as in the coffee project, and that actually demonstrates how the two continents is actually linked, because the sustainability risks in one area will affect the other area. So coffee, the state of sustainability coffee in Indonesia as a producer, and I know that Brazil is also producing coffee. It's one of the, I think, top 3 countries that UK are importing coffee from: Brazil, Vietnam, and Indonesia. And it's obvious that Brazil is also, for example, the state of farmers, the state of the farming society, and also and it's obvious that pollutions and environmental impact in Indonesia will affect the coffee production, and that will then affect the coffee import from the UK. And similarly, anything to do with the policy in the UK will also impact the coffee production in Indonesia. Maybe there's a change in trade policy in the UK, will then affect also in the producing countries, UK or Brazil. So indeed, I totally agree that the collaboration or the impact of this agriculture production in both Brazil, Indonesia, and other producing countries will give effect to the European countries.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Benny. Sarah, there's another question for you. It's from Alvori Alert. He's a graduate from the graduate program in Rural Sustainable Development from UniWest. It's another state university in Paraná. So the economic region is strongly based on the production of the animal protein that demands lots of water. This production is based in the use of waters from fonts, and that limited its expansion in the agribusiness. So how does the UK articulate the agricultural productions with the use of the sweet water?
Sorry, what exactly is the question?
Okay, I'll repeat that. Okay, so the economy in my region is strongly based on animal protein production, which demands a lot of water. This production is based in the use of the deep pits water, which limits the expansion of the agro-industry. So the question is, how does the United Kingdom, how does UK manages agriculture production with the use of this water?
That's not an area that I NERC specifically, or that I'm aware of that we actually cover.
I don't know if you would like to add some comments.
I mean, it's something that I think you need to look at the specifics area around it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, no worries. That's fine.
Yeah, I'm sure that there probably is something, but.
Benny, would you like to add something?
Sorry, I'm afraid this is also not my area of expertise. Agriculture, technical.
Okay, wonderful. So there's another one, but the question is not directly, specifically to one of you, so feel free to answer those. There are many divides among old cars and pollution, old cars and collections, old cars and traffic, old cars and culture, old cars and gas consumptions. How to deal with those dimensions? The question is from Maclovia Correia da Silva from UTFPR. It's a federal university in Paraná. Federal Technological University in Paraná.
Eliane, sorry, can you repeat the question? I missed the last one, the last part of your question.
There are many divides among old cars and
old cars, okay. Yeah.
Old cars and collections, old cars and traffic, old cars and culture, old cars and gas consumption. How to deal with those dimensions?
Thank you. That's I was waiting for the questions. Actually, it's not an easy question to answer, because if you look at circular economy, I keep saying that you need to utilize your product as long as possible. But obvious, the longer you use the car, the higher pollution that the car will then give to the environment. And also, the longer you use the car, the higher effort in terms of making sure that the car is actually fit for purpose, put it that way. And in the UK, there is a so-called MOT, and sometimes at a certain age, you say, no, it's not worth it anymore, because a lot of money that you need to spend to maintain the car so that it's worthy, it's a road worthy. And this is one of the area in circular economy that I particularly would like to dig more, because when we look at carbon footprint, then people tend to use LCA, right? Let's do the LCA so we know what the carbon footprint is. But then when it comes into trading off between this, what is it going to be? What is the currency, if you see what I mean? Is it going to be carbon footprint, or is it going to be money? So is it going to be economic benefits first, or environmental benefits first, or maybe social benefits first? I think it's a great question here, and I would like to invite you for a further discussion with me, because this area I'm genuinely interested in. Thank you.
Wonderful. There's another one, Benny, for you. You have funds for recycling residues and recycling industries research.
Yes.
Do you have funds for developing research for recycling residues and recycling industries?
Yes and no. The one that I'm doing at the moment, I'm only in charge for bringing back those windows, if you like, components of facade to the factory, where then it can be dismantled there. My challenge and the business model of this is that it seems at the moment that none of the producers, none of the suppliers of facade would like to take part of that, because they said, no, actually, we are selling the facade, but someone else will need to be responsible. The government needs to be responsible for, put a bit more money on the circular economy, or on the recycling side of it, not us, according to them. But then we have to come up with a certain trade-off, in the sense that, can we, for example, while we are competing, we means the manufacturers of these windows, while we are competing, can we also collaborate? Can we also collaborate in terms of bringing back those end of life windows or aluminiums into a centralized dismantling facilities, where then we can work together for a new business for everyone. So this model of co-opetition is actually quite interesting, for research, especially in the area of sustainability.
Yeah, thank you.
So again, I would like to invite you if you want to have
we'll
a discussion.
Open discussion with that, right?
Yeah, indeed.
Okay.
Very good question.
Yeah, good. Professor Benny, there's a question from Jaren Garcia. He's from the Paraná State University of Ponta Grossa. What is the position of the electronic waste in the circular economy? Could you tell a little bit more about researchers in this area?
Unfortunately, I am not working on the electronic waste. However, it's pretty clear the waste regulations, the electronic waste regulations in Europe, including the UK, is pretty clear. Yeah, and I think it's pretty black and white in that respect. What's interesting, however, is that we need to look at reusability. Yeah. So in terms of recycling, it's clear. But in terms of using it before end of life, that's I think it's still opportunity for research. Battery is also the same. When we look at a Toyota car, Prius, they are now entering end of life. Whilst the car is entering end of life, the battery is actually may have about 80% life. Sorry, about 30 or 40% life. The question is, can we use or can we repurpose these batteries for other appliances that demand less power than a car? Vacuum cleaners, perhaps? So that's the kind of business models that I think we can explore in the future.
Wonderful. There's a question, Benny, for you as well from Mauricio Jedic from the University Positivo. You mentioned possible efforts to promote circular economy during and after the pandemic, and we are certainly seeing people buying less and buying only essential foods. I hope that trend lasts and proves educational. However, we're also seeing more use of cleaning agents and more goods being discarded due to the fear of contamination. Green chemistry could help with developing less polluting cleaning agents, but how to deal with the discarded goods and the risk of contamination?
Yeah, the risk of contamination is obviously high, and I think I'd like to invite also multidisciplinary teams here to look at from the health point of view, because I don't think that's been taken care of, particularly in developing countries. I've seen not so much in the UK, but in other developing countries, it's the amount of plastics, the amount of waste generated. You're absolutely right. The more cleaning products we use, the more anxious we are, the more we use cleaning products, which means the more pollutions that are likely to happen. I don't think that's been taken care of at the moment, and that's, again, it's an opportunity. But perhaps if Sarah's know these things, please jump in if you wanted to add on this matter, Sarah.
I think in terms of the opportunity for looking at that's some of the research that we're certainly doing at the moment in the UK, and I would urge other countries to sort of do similar. So we have an urgency call out, which is mainly UK focused, which is asking researchers, what can we learn from the current time and current situation, which could have longer term positive benefits. So can we use the current situation, which is negative overall in terms of economies and everything else going through, and apply it for future? So we've got ongoing calls looking at that and seeing also if the opportunities, once we have the spending review, we know where things are, if there are other areas that we could explore in the longer term, sort of to learn from the situation and take it forward. So those are certainly areas that we're exploring, and I think the UK government is also keen to see if we can do something to take some positivity out and forward. So I'm sure there would be ways to actually collaborate and take forward. We don't know yet the themes for some of the international research because a lot of our international research, we're given themes and areas to actually look at. And that's where the vast majority of our funding is. I don't know what it's like for you guys, if you have similar or not. So then if we use our core funding, it's only very small amounts generally for that, but there's got to be areas of work that we should be doing.
Indeed, indeed. And one of the things that I was thinking of, I spoke to one of my colleagues looking at the developing new materials, textile materials, whereby instead of using the disposable masks, for example, they have the similar functionalities for long-lasting mask textile. So that's a possibility, isn't it?
Yeah, wonderful. And from the same professor, Sarah, to you, he mentions that he didn't see any circular economy topics in the list as you presented. Are there funding opportunity for collaboration in this area?
Yes, basically. Circular economy is an underlying theme that runs across. So, in short, yes.
Yeah. Plenty, I'm sure. Plenty. I've seen a lot. Thank you, Sarah.
And actually, this is something that should be coming out a lot more if we're wanting to be more sustainable overall as a planet. So, how we actually reuse or recycle or reintroduce and refurbish it all the way through. So.
Wonderful. So we had just very interesting questions to open a dialogue for reflecting a little bit about our future collaboration. I think there's so much ground on it, so much, so different spaces for us to collaborate with and to reflect about joint collaboration. So thank you so much for interacting together with us and for your time being here with us. We had a wonderful time expanding our ideas on the sustainability possibilities for collaboration. I'd like to invite now Professor Unido, our president, and also Marcia Espinosa, if you want to join the discussion or just to make some final remarks for us to finish this session today.
I'd like just to thank Sarah and Benny for being with us, and I think that we have so many possibilities for collaboration, and Vera is doing a very nice job here in Brazil with us, and sure that as we are organizing our new arrangements for research and innovation, and the SDGs are very important for us, Paraná State will strengthen the collaboration with the UK in the next years. And not just myself, but the researchers that are here and the people from our University of the States that are here with us today and yesterday, in this week, in the other days that we are here. We are going to discuss the SDGs, not just in Paraná State, but in other countries also. We are going to strengthen the relationship with you and with other states and regions of the world. Thank you so much again for being with us. And in Portuguese, I'd like to say obrigado para todos os participantes brasileiros que estiveram conosco. E vamos em frente. Amanhã nós temos um dia muito importante também, porque nós vamos discutir a cooperação com a província de Quebec no Canadá. Tomorrow we are going to discuss the SDGs and the collaboration with Quebec province in Canada, because Paraná State has a traditional and long cooperation with Quebec also. And we are just choosing some specific regions and countries for strengthening our partnership. And of course, UK is one very important countries for us, and some states and provinces like Quebec in Canada are important also. Thank you so much, and see you tomorrow then. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.